So, I'm about to set down this teacup on the desk, and then I'm going to pick up the teacup again with the left hand or the right hand, and I haven't decided yet which hand I'm going to use. And I'm going to decide to use the right hand. Now, before I picked up the teacup with the right hand, God knew what I was going to do, right? And God's never wrong. So there was no chance I was going to pick up the teacup with the left hand. And therefore, I did not actually have the ability to use the left hand. It was necessary that I would use the right hand because God knows everything. God already knew what I was going to do, and God's never wrong, so there was no chance of me going in any other direction. Right? Well, this is the ancient question of whether and how God's knowledge of what we are going to do is compatible with human freedom. We could phrase the question or the challenge, or in some cases the argument, in this way. If God knows what we are going to decide, then there is a 0% chance that God is wrong, and so there's a 0% chance that we will decide any way other than the way God foresees. Therefore, if God knows what we are going to decide, then we have no ability to do otherwise, and we have no free will. Is this argument any good? Do those of us who believe in God have any need to worry about free will? Or, more precisely, do those of us who believe in God need to worry about the compatibility of God having foreknowledge, or God having omniscience, God having all knowledge, but foreknowledge specifically, God knowing what we are going to do? Do we have to worry about the compatibility of God knowing what we are going to do and our having free will? That's the question, and the answer is no, nothing to worry about. This is not a good argument. The argument fails entirely to give us any reason to think that God's foreknowledge and human free will are incompatible. So let's start here. Here's the thing about knowledge. We never know what is false. We may sometimes speak about things that we strongly believe or are very confident of and say we know them, like when Ronald Reagan said that liberals know so much that ain't true. But this is speaking very loosely. If we believe something that's not true, we don't know it. We only think we do. Knowledge is of the truth, always and only of the truth. And so there's a 0% chance that what God knows is not true because it's knowledge, not because it's God's knowledge. And more to the point, there's a 0% chance that what God knows is not true because we're talking about what God knows, not because we're talking about any necessity in the thing that God knows, which could still involve free will. When I know what my kids are going to do, there's a 0% chance that they won't do it. Not because they don't freely decide what to do, but because we're assuming that I have knowledge, and knowledge is of the truth. And that's just what knowledge means. Knowledge is not a falsehood. When I think I know what they're going to do and they don't do it, that's because I never did know it. So the kids have all their freedom to decide what to do, and on those occasions when I know what they're going to do, they still have the chance of acting differently. There's no necessity in what they do. The only necessity is in the fact that knowledge is of the truth. There's only a 0% chance that they'll do any differently than I know, on the assumption that I really do know. Now, as an aside, this is why some people make a distinction between necessity of a thing and necessity of a statement. Take the statement, Mark knows that the kids will eat the candy. Now, if that's true, then there's some necessity there, but let's understand just what that means. It's necessary that the statement, Mark knows that the kids will eat the candy, it's necessary that that statement is knowledge of the fact that they will eat the candy. But their action to eat the candy doesn't have any necessity. It's still freely chosen. They could have done otherwise. But this clever distinction might be a bit confusing, and it's totally okay to work without it. And if you don't understand what I've been talking about, since I said just as an aside, this is why some people make a distinction between necessity of a thing and necessity of a statement. If you're not following this, forget it and move on. And perhaps the critic will say, but wait, isn't God all-powerful and omniscient, knowing everything? God's knowledge is different from yours. God's knowledge is never wrong. God's knowledge is not like Mark's knowledge of what the kids will do. God's knowledge is infallible, and it comes with power to cause things, perhaps. And at any rate, whether we're talking about power or not, certainly God's knowledge is infallible. God cannot be wrong, and so therefore, says the critic, there is no chance of things ever going differently if God knows how they're going to go, and therefore no free will. Well, this is just stating the initial question again, and I think still missing the point. I would say the fact that God is omniscient just means God is not more knowledgeable than I am. God is more knowledgeable than I am. God is never wrong. There's a 0% chance that I will do something other than what God knows I'll do, but that's still just because that's what knowledge is. God is all-knowing, but that does not mean that the normal order of things is reversed. There's fact and there's knowledge of fact, or there's fact about how I pick up the teacup, and there's the knowledge of the fact. And in my case, knowledge of the fact that I picked up the teacup is looking backwards in time and saying, I picked up the teacup. I hope I used the right hand in this illustration. I'm having trouble remembering what I did. I think I used the right hand. I hope so. I used the right hand. So I know I used the right hand by remembering it. And because that's what I know, there's a 0% chance I did otherwise. But that doesn't mean I wasn't free at the time to choose to use the left hand. It just means that now I know what was done. Now I know it was freely decided by remembering it. Knowledge has a 0% chance of being wrong, not because there's any chance of things going differently, but because we have knowledge of what was on other grounds other than the knowledge freely decided. There's knowledge of the fact, and there's the fact. And the fact is the reason that the knowledge of the fact is there, not vice versa. Why would that be any different when you're looking forward in time? When you're knowing something before it's done, you're still knowing it because it's going to be done. It's not going to be done because you know it. That's not how knowledge works. That's not how facts work. That's not how reality works. Fact and knowledge of fact have a one-directional causality normally. The fact is the reason for knowledge of the fact, not vice versa. So, I should pause to say, by the way, there is a sense in which we can talk about knowledge causing a fact. Thomas Aquinas says, he says, for the knowledge of God is to all creatures what the knowledge of the artificer is to things made by his art. Aquinas is talking about the knowledge of how to make a thing being the cause of that thing. Like, if I know how to make a YouTube video, my knowledge of how to do that is part of the causing of the video to be made. But when we're talking about a person's choice, or for that matter, about just about anything else, any other case of knowledge and a fact, knowledge is not the cause of the fact, but vice versa. God's omnipotence and omniscience don't reverse that formula. A fact is the reason for the knowledge of the fact, not vice versa. So let's clarify that we're talking about two things. First, there's the truth of the statement, Mark chooses to lift the cup of tea with this hand. Second, there's the truth of the statement, God knows that Mark chooses to lift the cup of tea with this hand. The second statement is true because the first one is true, not the other way around. Thinking about time might help, and this is one extra layer of explanation that some of the great religious philosophers have used, where I'm thinking of Augustine, Boethius, Thomas Aquinas in particular. God is outside of time, they say, and so God does not actually have any foreknowledge, any before knowledge. From God's perspective, everything is in the present. We could almost say everything is in the past. God only knows what we do after we do it, or as a result of us doing it, or to phrase it a little more precisely, God only knows what we are doing while he is watching us do it from his eternal perspective. Now, this may help, and it's helped me in the past, and I do think that God is outside of time. But it's not necessary to think this, and in any case, it's still just an illustration of the main point. That point is, once again, knowledge that a thing is so happens because the thing is so, not the other way around. Thank you for watching, and I'm hoping that in the next probably 3 videos I can look at some of those great religious philosophers on the same question.